We are right in the middle of the summer doldrums, so tonight we're taking a look at what the future holds. We start with Mark Spencer, a creative partner with Ripple Training. Mark is a trainer, developer, and runs his own post-production company. Tonight he discusses his techniques for developing plugins and what it takes to succeed in media today. Next, Philip Hodgetts, the CEO of Intelligent Assistants, takes a mid-year look at our industry and shares his thoughts on where we're headed for the rest of the year. Next, Ned Soltz, contributing editor for Red Shark News, looks at the future of camera technology, especially entry-level cameras, with his expectations for upcoming announcements. Next, Michael Kammes, director of technology for Keycode Media, looks at the rapidly evolving world of workflow, shared projects, and collaboration. All this, plus James DeRuvo with the weekly DoddleNEWS update. The buzz starts now.
Since the dawn of digital filmmaking,
authoritative,
one show serves a worldwide network of media professionals,
current,
uniting industry experts,
production,
filmmakers,
post-production,
and content creators around the planet.
Distribution.
From the media capital of the world in Los Angeles, California, the Digital Production Buzz goes live now.
Welcome to the Digital Production Buzz, the world's longest-running podcast for the creative content industry, covering media production, post-production, and marketing around the world. Hi, my name is Larry Jordan. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's not a lot going on right now, so this is the perfect time to stop, collect our thoughts, and start to plan for the future. We're going to do this over several shows. Tonight, we're chatting with some of our regulars about what they expect in the second half of the year. Then next week, we focus on training, because with all the changes in technology in our industry, ongoing education is critical. Finally, as IBC gets closer, we'll provide a series of previews on what to expect at this major industry event. Right now, though, I want to invite you to subscribe to our free weekly show newsletter at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Every issue, every week, provides quick links to the different segments on the show, plus articles of interest to filmmakers. Best of all, it's free and comes out every Saturday morning. And now it's time for our DoddleNEWS update with James DeRuvo. Hello, James.
Happy Thursday, Larry.
And 3.5 weeks until IBC.
I know.
James, what have we got in the news this week?
Well, this week is, speaking of conventions, this week is SIGGRAPH.
Mm-hmm.
That's the annual graphics convention where a whole bunch of computer geeks get together and debate over nodes. At SIGGRAPH this week, NVIDIA announced a brand new GPU called the Quattro RTX. It has 8K support. It can render up to 25 times faster with dual GPU cards. Has multi-processors with up to 4,608 CUDA cores. Remember when they were like dual core was a big thing? 4,608 CUDA cores and 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory. And it has data transfer speeds of up to, get this, 100 gigabytes per second.
That's a stunning amount of speed. So what's the background on this?
NVIDIA worked with Red to develop this new GPU that will give 8K video projects the ability, because they wanted to be able to view footage in real time without the need of down-resing or using proxies to do it. And they ended up coming up with this new Turing architecture, which can do it using a single GPU processor, which frees up the other one to do other things. It's a workhorse, and it'll get us to use 8K video as a standard a heck of a lot faster than expected.
But since we can't really see 4K, is there really a need for 8K images?
Oh, absolutely there is, because if you think about it, if you think about the heavy amount of CGI, computer CGI that's going on, the more realistic it looks, the more things you can do. And when you have more realistic CGI footage, it keeps the viewer into the story even better when you're watching it, and it doesn't make it look like you're going from reel to cartoon to reel to cartoon. And being able to go from 8K down to 4K, if you're shooting in 4K, makes for a better image anyway. Even though the starting price of the Quadro RTX is probably going to be around $10,000, NVIDIA has already announced that they're going to make consumer-grade versions for video gaming. And they'll announce that at Gamescom, I believe, in October.
All right, that's NVIDIA. What's happening elsewhere this week?
Number 2, speaking of Red issues a new launch date for the Hydrogen One smartphone. The Hydrogen One smartphone is going to come out on November 2nd, and pre-orders will go out a month sooner on October 2nd. But if you ordered the titanium model, however, due to how difficult it is to mill titanium, those who wanted the titanium model will have to wait until 2019 to get them. Red is also offering a beta program called the Houdini Developer Program, which if you are a pre-order and you want to do some final beta testing on the firmware, Red is offering the Houdini Developer model to test out before anyone else.
What was the problem that delayed the original release date?
During certification, a problem popped up with a part deep inside the design of the smartphone, which forced Red to go back to the drawing board and completely retool for that particular part. So they had to cancel their launch date in order to get FCC approval. Fortunately, Red was able to solve the problem and get back to manufacturing sooner rather than later, and the FCC quickly approved the fix and the design, so now it's all approved. And Red's game-changing 4-view holographic smartphone is back on schedule with about a month delay. No big deal.
I really am looking forward to seeing what this looks like in real life.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
We'll just wait until November.
Yeah.
What's next?
You know when Apple announced the Animoji?
Mm-hmm.
The Animoji is this emoji that it basically enables you to create a live streaming cartoon character using your own voice. And when I saw them do that, I thought, well, okay, it's kind of kitschy for people who want to play with it. But sooner or later, it's going to become a serious cinematic tool, and it has. There's a new app called Live Face, which you put on the iPhone X, and it turns your mobile device into a motion capture camera. The app will enable iPhone X users to capture the information data on your face, much like the Animojis do, and then use it to create live-streamed animated characters for animated features, not just for the smartphone. And with the companion software, you'll be able to also add full-body motion capture, interfacing with additional motion capture devices without the need of creating a complicated and expensive multiple camera array to capture all of your data.
Very cool. James, what other stories are you following this week?
Search data indicates that people are moving on from DSLRs in favor of mirrorless designs, but that may be good news for DSLR users who stay the course. Blackmagic ships DaVinci Resolve 15 with over 500 new features suggested just from the beta alone, and we continue our tutorial series on how to edit with Blackmagic's ever-evolving NLE, which now has visual effects integrated into it via Fusion.
I should mention that Ned Soltz is coming on later in this show and will specifically talk about mirrorless designs and DaVinci Resolve 15. So we're going to follow up on that news story with coverage later in this show.
Ooh, that's what we call synergy. So what else are you talking about this week?
Well, this week we get to hear from our regulars on a wide variety of subjects, but one that I want to call to your attention is Mark Spencer. He's our lead guest after we get done chatting with you. He has some very helpful thoughts, not only on developing plugins, but how to make a living in media during these very challenging times.
It's hard enough, but lately it seems to have gotten a little harder, so I look forward to hearing what he has to say.
There's some good comments. I was very impressed. James, for people that need to know more, where can they go on the web to follow the latest news?
All these stories and more can be found at DoddleNEWS.com.
And James DeRuvo is the editor-in-chief of DoddleNEWS and joins us every week. We'll see you next Thursday.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Here's another website I want to introduce you to, DoddleNEWS.com. DoddleNEWS gives you a portal into the broadcast, video, and film industries. It's a leading online resource presenting news, reviews, and products for the film and video industry. DoddleNEWS also offers a resource guide and crew management platform specifically designed for production. These digital call sheets, along with their app, directory, and premium listings, provide in-depth organizational tools for busy production professionals. DoddleNEWS is a part of the Thalo Arts community, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with resources you need to succeed. Whether you want the latest industry news, need to network with other creative professionals, or require state-of-the-art online tools to manage your next project, there's only one place to go, DoddleNEWS.com. Mark Spencer is a creative partner with Ripple Training. There, he creates tutorials and plugins. He also owns Day Street Productions, which is a post-production company that produces, shoots, and edits corporate video. Hello, Mark. It's been a long time.
Hey, Larry. Yeah, it has been a very long time. Nice talking to you.
It's always fun talking with you. Let's start with the big question. Tell us about Ripple Training. What is it?
Ripple Training is a company that's been around, I think at least 10 years now. We provide tools that help people learn how to do production in post. And we do a lot on the post side, and particularly with Final Cut Pro, Motion, DaVinci Resolve is a big part of our focus of getting people up to speed on how to use those applications to become better storytellers.
Would you consider Ripple to be more of a training company, or more of a post company, or more of a developer?
It's a training company for sure.
I was looking up in your record. You've been using Final Cut, since it was first released in 1999, but where you're best known is in 2004 and onward, you specialized in motion. What was it about motion that caught your attention?
I remember back then I was getting into After Effects. First I got into editing, and then I got attracted to the idea of motion graphics and visual effects and really got into After Effects. And I remember when motion first came out, it just intuitively appealed to me immediately. I mean, I really enjoyed After Effects, but motion seemed faster and easier to get into. And I loved the real-time playback capacity of it at that time. And we're talking 2005, I think, at that time. So that's what really got me into it originally.
Well, you mentioned that Ripple is focused on training, but about 2 years ago, you shifted your focus into developing plugins. Why?
I've actually been doing that more like about 5 or 6 years now. It had to do with learning motion, because motion is not only motion graphics and visual effects application, it's really a development environment for all of the tools that are available in Final Cut for creating titles and transitions and generators. And I discovered you can make those things yourself. I found that I could make tools that other people found useful. So that's really got me into that I realized I could make things that people could get so they didn't have to make them themselves. It was cheaper for them to buy it and use it than to sit and learn how to use the application to make them.
Well, what are some of the plugins you've created?
One we started with really is still one of our biggest ones. Is called Ripple Callouts, which is a way of annotating video by adding on-screen lines and arrows and circles and whatnot. I think we're up to about a dozen different plugins now. The big ones today are, we have one called Ripple Tools Complete, which is a collection of different tools. It's a little hard to describe because there's about 30 different tools. So it's things like a cloner if you want to get rid of a bad pixel that you had on your lens, or dust on your lens, or you wanted to remove something from the shot. Or if you have vertical video that you have to deal with because somebody shot with their iPhone, up and down, which used to be a bad thing and is now becoming a standard. But one of the tools in there allows you to display vertical video in the way that you usually see on the web, where you've got things on the side to kind of fill out your frame. And then we've got looks in there and special effects and text effects and picture-in-picture and just a whole bunch of different tools in one big package. So that's been a really popular thing. In fact, we combined two. We had Ripple Tools, and we came out with another version, and we put it all together in one big package.
You distribute through FX Factory. Why use FX Factory?
So FX Factory is interesting. It's a platform. You kind of think of like the App Store for plugins because it works that way. It's a platform where you can browse and try out plugins that are completely free and then choose to install the ones that you want. And the nice thing about it that we like it always keeps everything up to date. So you don't have to worry about, do I have the latest version? Is it in the right place? It installs them correctly and keeps them up to date. So we enjoy using FX Factory as our platform, distributing all our plugins.
Put your developer hat on for just a minute. What is the process that you go through to create a plugin?
Well, it's a combination of thinking about what I need as an editor and as a producer when I'm making videos. What are the things that I really find that I need, like a nice title animation or nice transitions? So I start from there, and then I figure out what can I design, what can I build using the tools in Motion to do that. And Motion's really got a great tool set for doing that. And actually, that's one reason all our tools work specifically in Final Cut Pro 10 is because I'm really dedicated to the Motion platform as a development environment. So it really comes from figuring out what I like to use and what I like to see, and then I figure out what I'm able to make using Motion.
From a business point of view, is there money to be made in plugins?
Sure, there can be. The trick of it is that, there's a lot. It's like anything in this industry. Once thing gets popular, it gets bigger, and a lot of folks are in there. So there's a lot of plugins out there. There's a lot of plugins on the FX Factory platform, and there's a lot of free plugins out there. But if you create something that people find useful, you can make some money doing it, and people definitely do. So I think about anybody who's got to do, a lot of transitions or titles. Yes, they could learn how to do it themselves, but if that's not their focus and it costs them $25 or $50 for a package that lets them get a product done, it's a very high return for them.
Take a step back. You've been a trainer. You're in the post-production industry yourself. You've been a developer. For people who are struggling to figure out how to earn a living in our business, where's the money these days?
Boy, that's tough.
I have a hard time with this one myself.
Yeah, it's tough. It's funny because on the one hand, all the tools have become so much less expensive. I mean, it's really amazing. The tools are available for everything from editing and motion graphics and visual effects and color correction and sound design. But we're also expected to be able to use all those tools. But I think the way to make a living is you've got to specialize to some extent. You've got to pick something that you're going to focus on where you can do something unique. Like, I'm really going to be an editor and not try to do everything, or I'm really going to be a motion graphics person, or I'm really going to get into sound design, or I'm really going to, be an expert in shooting corporate video. I mean, I think you have to pick something and sell yourself on that skill set, and then depend on others to round everything else out. But it's a tough thing. There's so much free stuff out there, and some of it's extremely good. And there's a new generation coming up that is used to getting a lot of stuff for free. So I think it's a really interesting environment because there's great tools out there, but it's also very challenging to figure out how to make a living using these tools.
So then for those new people coming in, the students coming out of school or people making a career change into the industry, what advice would you offer them to help them prepare for the future?
Well, I'm not a big go to film school and spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get an education that way. I think it's good to get associated with somebody who's in the industry to get educated. I really think there's an apprentice model that can work, that you don't just learn everything from the internet. You need to be associated with people that you work with face to face every day. And that might be getting on a film crew or working in an advertising agency or getting in a post house. But I think you need to build relationships face to face with people where you build the skill sets and, more importantly, the connections with people, because I think that's where you end up getting jobs. Is you can learn the skill sets sitting in your room, on the internet, but you've really got to have those connections where people learn that they can trust you and you're dependable and you do good work. And that's a face-to-face kind of thing. So I think it's important that you're developing those relationships on a face-to-face basis.
Mark, for people that want to learn more, where can they go on the web to learn about Ripple Training?
Yeah, just Ripple Training. RippleTraining.com is where we have our tutorials there. And we're actually expanding. I actually did a Logic tutorial recently because I'm also a musician, or I should say a budding musician. And we're also Resolve just came out with their version 15 on today. doing this interview, and we're coming out with a advanced color grading tutorial that I'll be doing on Resolve, and that all will be available at Ripple Training when it's out.
That website is all one word, Ripple, RIPPLE, training.com. And Mark Spencer is a creative partner with Ripple Training. And Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Larry, I really appreciate it. Good talking to you.
Philip Hodgetts is the CEO of Lumberjack System. Even better, he's a regular here on The Buzz who specializes in explaining new technology. Hello, Philip. Welcome back.
Hi, Larry. It's been a little while.
It has been, but you've been busy, and we have been forgetful and taking so long to call you back. Put your pundit hat on. I'm going to have you be a guru today rather than a developer. As you look back over the first half of the year, what stands out as highlights, or lowlights for that matter, in the industry?
Well, I think unlike most of the industry, we get actually fairly busy during the summer. That's when we do our new projects. But I think you're right. The industry does tend to sort of slow down a little bit in the summer. There's been the obvious trends like artificial intelligence, machine learning, high dynamic range production, 360 video. These are all the same themes that we've been talking about to some degree over the last 2 years, really. And they've matured in some ways and not in others. My particular interest is in the machine learning, artificial intelligence side. And it seems to be hard to get from that point where we have good ideas and there are speech to text, obviously the transcription tools that have come out. But we haven't really seen any revolutionary use of machine learning in the production process. We see a lot of this machine learning being used by the program production companies, the studios, to do everything from vetting scripts, which famously Netflix does. They have a machine learning tool that looks over all proposed projects and ranks them against the likelihood of making a successful series out of that project. They do make it clear that the final green light is still done by a human, but it's heavily advised by a machine, it would seem. And whether that's contributing to Netflix's success or holding them back is for somebody else than me to say. But we haven't seen very much other than in sort of some of the high-end asset management tools. There we have some implementation of image search, which is certainly a valuable tool in that context, and speech search, which again is a valuable tool in that context, but nothing that's trickling down into everyday production. The sort of people that have work in the vast majority of the industry outside of the studios. I'm not surprised to see the rise of Blackmagic Resolve coming out, and although the general consensus is that it's not yet quite the perfect tool for editorial, there are certainly people like Digital Film Tree that have adopted it as their one and only tool throughout the facility. And there's actually a huge benefit in doing that, in the same way that there is a benefit in adopting Adobe Suite across the facility. But in the case of Resolve, you don't have different applications. You simply have the one application that has different roles. This means there's no XML export between Audio Suite and there's no OMS or AAS to deal with. There's no XML to get to a color grading suite. It's all just in the same app, and that's going to have a lot of benefits, and particularly into the collaborative workflow area where those collaborative features are so valuable.
Philip, take a breath. I want to ask a question here once in a while.
Okay, sure.
That's
it's your show.
As you look back, you mentioned that there's a lot of stuff that we've been talking about for a while with machine learning and AR and HDR and higher resolution. Do you think that our expectations of technological change are too high? I mean, some of this stuff is really hard to do in terms of just the implementation of HDR, for instance, is non-trivial. Do you think that we're expecting miracles to happen too quickly?
Always. The inevitable human perception is that we, particularly if we've been in this industry while we're always looking for the next new trend, what's going to be hot next year, how to become a leader in that particular space. It is remarkable, and honestly, we've just upgraded, after 7 years, we've upgraded our television to a 4K HDR set, but none of the sources of television that we normally watch have any HDR content. I have yet to see the pleasure of HDR on the HDR set. Getting that through the pipeline to the viewer is still non-trivial, as is getting AR experiences and VR experiences to the end user. These are still non-trivial problems to solve.
Well, I'll invite you over to watch HDR on my set, and you can decide if you like it or not.
Sure. Actually, now we have a 55-inch set, but at our 14-foot viewing distance, we get all the benefits, I'm told, of 720p.
Well, yeah, but the popcorn still tastes good, so you're doing okay.
It sure does.
Well, let's take a look. Flip this around. We've taken a look sort of at the last 6 months. What are you expecting in the next 6 months in terms of trends that are developing or anything else we should pay attention to?
One of the things that's been trending that I think most of us don't pay any attention to because we don't set up facilities, we don't have to send video around a big production facility. But the big shift from sending video around on SDI to sending video around those facilities over IP networks, a trend famously started by Panasonic with their IP-based workflows all those years ago with their first HD formats. But that is now becoming the ubiquitous. The trend is instead of having video, having SDI in a facility, you just send it all over IP from place to place throughout the facility.
We've had a chance to talk with SMPTE and a bunch of other people, not just about the ATSC 3.0 standard, but as you said, the shift from SDI to IP. One of the things I found interesting is that in the World Cup games that just wrapped up about a month and a half ago, Fox had production people in Russia, but were switching the show and creating the broadcasts out of Los Angeles because they were feeding the cameras back via IP. It just revolutionizes how we're going to do production.
Oh, yes. At some of the HPA retreat sessions, there was just amazing how they use this network of IP-based network where the switcher is in Sydney and the production is in Melbourne or vice versa, and just moving the control around to whichever control room happens to be the most available at the time. It completely changes it for big operations like that. And absolutely, although I doubt that it's ever going to change a single thing in my production line.
Well, I don't think it's going to change much in the really smaller groups, but I think in the post-production houses, the ability to work with artists who are geographically scattered and yet can still get access to masters via IP, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for the post houses. Do you think?
I think there's a lot of opportunity for the post houses, but I do worry a little bit about the fact that means it's very much decentralized, so that you could have your creative artists anywhere, and if we know any trends that the industry follows, it's where can I make this the cheapest? And like call centers going overseas, I think IP-based workflows will send certain functions and certain jobs probably into lower price markets.
Yep, I think that's absolutely something that we have to worry about. What are the thoughts? What are you looking forward to at IBC?
At IBC, really just seeing what people have been doing with machine learning. I think there's a lot of the pre-publicity for IBC has been focused on AI and machine learning. And I'm really keen to see where people are thinking this might be applied, not just like the headline examples that we've seen that seem too good to be true. I'm actually coming to the realization that AI will probably be more useful in little ways that we use every day rather than in a grand, oh, yes, we're going to edit videos with artificial intelligence. I think it'll just be like an intelligent assistant. Oh, funny that name. Sitting there by our side, just making our life easier.
Well, you know, one of the cool things is the whole concept of machine learning is one that we deserves an entire segment. And I know we're going to bring you back to help pitch what's happening at IBC in a couple of weeks. So let's save that for the next couple of weeks out. We can spend more time talking about it. Philip, for people that want more information, where can they go on the web to learn about you?
Lumberjacksystem.com. That's Lumberjack single and system singular.
And
there only is one Lumberjack system.
And Philip Hodgetts is the CEO of Lumberjack System. Philip, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye. Ned Soltz is an author, editor, educator, and consultant on all things related to digital video. He's also a contributing editor for Red Shark News, and best of all, he's a regular here on The Buzz. Hello, Ned. Welcome back.
Hi, Larry. Good to be back today.
It's the dog days of summer right now. IBC is still 4 weeks away. From your perspective, what does the fall look like?
Well, of course, right now the landscape has changed ever so slightly with the release of DaVinci Resolve 15.0 this week. After Blackmagic going through 8 iterations of beta, it is finally out in release form, and that's the kickoff for the fall season, I think.
What makes it a kickoff?
Because we've been anticipating it, and we really knew it was going to come at some point this summer. I, for one, didn't think they were going to be going through 8 beta iterations, but it was probably very good because they had a couple of major things really to nail down, mostly in terms of the Fusion integration, as well as additional functionality with Fairlight, because this now becomes a more rich, a more complex environment. And I commend them for all the work they put into it.
Okay, so that's DaVinci Resolve 15. Anything interesting bubbling in the world of cameras?
Well, I think what we're going to be seeing this fall, if not product, we're going to see an announcement and a way forward from both Canon and Nikon on the mirrorless camera front. Canon, I believe, has something scheduled for early September. This is a Photokina year. And of course, this mirrorless camera world bridges both the still and video worlds. And for years, of course, Canon and Nikon strongly resisted mirrorless, leaving that essentially for us video people to the Sony and Panasonic worlds. But we're going to start seeing movement by Canon and Nikon, which will, of course, further inspire Sony and Panasonic to become even more competitive in their cameras. And so we're really seeing this as a wave of the future, because despite the fact that I prefer the traditional video camera, a lot of that space is now going to mirrorless cameras.
What is it about mirrorless that makes these cameras significant?
The fact, of course, that in traditional DSLR photography, the big clunky mirror was necessary when you really were doing optical viewfinders and really didn't have the electronics that we have right now. And, of course, Nikon and Canon, which were really not in the mirrorless space, had all other kinds of rationalizations about why they weren't adequate for good still photography. But particularly Sony in the higher-end professional space started giving them a lot of competition, and therefore they've had to move in that direction right now. And, of course, the mirrorless cameras are the ones that are going to be the most suitable and most versatile for video.
Well, mirrorless because now both the monitor is electronic and the sensor's electronic.
And the sensor's electronic, right.
It's a direct connection between the sensor and the monitor, where before to see we had to look through the mirror.
Yes, exactly. That's the simple answer to it. You know, it'll be interesting to see what directions they go in. Canon already has a leg up on video. Nikon has never been particularly strong in video, so it would be interesting to see where their mirrorless cameras go in terms of video.
But Canon has had a bureaucratic problem with still cameras and the video cameras fighting for the same space. Is that being resolved, or is that continuing?
Obviously, I don't have any insights into what's going on in the Canon boardrooms or between the respective divisions, but I sense that there was much more of a conflict between the still and the video people, or let's not even say conflict. Let's just say much more of a gap between the still and the video world in Canon than, for example, in Sony. Even though these still and videos are two different areas of Sony, I think there is still much more synergy between the two. And this, again, is only in recent years.
Are you seeing a push in cameras toward higher resolution or greater support of HDR?
Right now, it's a greater HDR support, although we are starting to see more in the full frame environment, you know, particularly with the Canon, the C700 full frame and the Sony Venice. We're seeing the larger sensors in the Vericam and Red. So yes, I think there's that push on the very high end for the larger sensor resolution, but mostly people are trying to get into that HDR space, which still remains to me and probably just about everybody else a tremendous mystery, because none of us quite know what to do with it, how to deal with it, how to edit it, how to view it, and how to deliver it. Other than that, it sounds wonderful.
If you take a step back, what do you see as the key trends in camera technology? Lower prices, higher resolution, greater color saturation, bigger sensors. What's your sense?
Well, my sense at the moment is we're seeing basically a camera for every user. I just finished working, and I'm working on a review right now of the Sony Z190, which is the little sibling of the bigger Z280. And that really is a smaller camera now designed for the ENG market. So we're going back to 3 third-inch CMOS. We're seeing ENG type cameras with 2/3-inch CMOS sensors. No log, basically something for news and event acquisition, but in far smaller form factors. We see those, if you look at news folks carrying around cameras, not everybody's carrying the big shoulder camera anymore. So we're seeing cameras in that direction. We're seeing mirrorless cameras with greater use in production. And again, I'm even seeing those in ENG environments, particularly where you cover an event or see an event and somebody's just covering this for some kind of website. They're going to be using a mirrorless or a small form factor still camera for video as we move to higher ends of production. On the other side, with the radical increase in quality and resolution that we're seeing from Sony Venice, from Panasonic Vericams, and from the C700 now full frame, and Red, of course. Can't forget Red. So I think we're seeing that in all directions, while at the same time we're still seeing that mid-range of the market for low-budget indie production or for reality TV. So I think what we're seeing is cameras now, camera technology and camera pricing in every single possible range for every possible user.
From a practical point of view, as the camera size gets smaller, don't we have to worry about stabilizing the camera? When the cameras were heavier, they didn't move as much.
Oh, we have to worry, yes. They didn't move as much, and you had the inertia of the larger device. So we're going to be seeing more and more gimbal and other support types of products that are coming out. I'm looking forward, for example, to getting a hold of the new DJI Ronin S, because that's going to bring DJI technology, Ronin technology and Ronin stabilization to smaller form factor cameras. And I'm looking forward to getting one of those for my Sony mirrorless cameras. And that was the whole problem anyway with the move to the DSLRs and the mirrorless cameras and the small form factor cameras, is all the rigging that you really need to be able to support them and use them in a mobile ENG or field production type of environment. I know the other thing I'm looking for is more lighting development, with the RGB lighting becoming more and more technologically available, and that's a topic for another discussion, I suppose. But definitely the advances that we're going to be seeing in lighting over the past year, that we've seen, that we're going to be seeing over the next year, is something that I think we really need to be attuned to.
Well, there's no shortage of change coming.
No.
Ned, for people that want to keep track of your writing, where can they go on the web?
www.redsharknews.com is the best site right now.
And Ned Soltz is a contributing editor for the Red Shark News. And Ned, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Larry.
I want to introduce you to a new website, Thalo.com. Thalo is an artist community and networking site for creative people to connect, be inspired, and showcase their creativity. Thalo.com features content from around the world with a global perspective on all things creative. Thalo is the place for creative folks to learn, collaborate, market, and sell their works. Thalo is a part of Thalo Arts, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with the resources you need to succeed. Visit Thalo.com and discover how their community can help you connect, learn, and succeed. That's Thalo.com. In his current role as the Director of Technology at Keycode Media, Michael Kammes consults on the latest in technology and best practices into digital media and communication. And even better, he has this wonderful love of workflow, codecs, and process. Hello, Michael. Welcome back.
Hello, Mr. Jordan. Good to hear your voice again.
It is. We've been waiting way too long to talk to you. I'm glad to have you back again.
Thank you.
This evening, we're taking a look back at the first half of the year and then thinking about what's coming. So as you look back over the first half, what stands out as highlights or as disappointments?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. There's a couple of things that have been very good, especially on the creative editorial front. And one of them, you and I actually talked about at NAB, and that's the advent of the external GPU, the eGPU. The ability for applications on your computer to take advantage of an external graphics card to make renders go faster, to make your outputs go faster, and the fact that Apple introduced the ability to do this in a sanctioned way has opened up a lot of possibilities for creative users.
That's true, but I had a chance to work with the Blackmagic eGPU, and it really is targeted at a specific device, which is the 15-inch MacBook laptop, as opposed to just sort of general purpose. Are we seeing eGPUs becoming too hardware-specific?
I don't think that's the case. I think it's actually the other way around. I think it's the fact that, eGPUs haven't been out in the wild long enough for creative applications to actually sit up and take notice. And in typical, Apple fashion, here's something that's cool and it's released, and everyone has to play catch-up. So I think now we're going to be seeing Adobe and Apple and other creative applications out there start to use external devices like eGPU. They currently are.
I think that's a good point. Premiere doesn't take advantage of the eGPU at all, and Final Cut takes advantage of it only in a very limited fashion. So that's a good point. I think also with IBC coming up, we're going to hear a lot more noise about eGPUs as well. So what else strikes your fancy as you take a look back?
Well, as Ned mentioned, and I think Philip mentioned as well, the fact that Resolve is now out. I think Resolve is certainly making a play as I don't want to say a serious contender in the world of creative editorial and whatnot, but I think for the small work groups, I think for the one-person bands, I think Resolve is really gaining a lot of traction, and I've been pleasantly surprised with the multitude of betas that 15 had. As Philip mentioned, I don't think it's quite ready for primetime editorial, and when I mean primetime, I mean big budget feature film, television, etc. But I think it's another tool in your arsenal that you should know, and I think it's made great strides over the past 6 or 7 months.
Well, you've talked about things that are highlights, DaVinci Resolve and eGPUs. What about disappointments?
Yeah, one thing that's been in my craw all year is that I had really hoped after NAB last year we would see more development of cognitive services or AI as more of a broad term, to have those tools more available to the end user, the creative. And right now we have things like transcriptive, which will allow you to get your footage transcribed. That's great, but in terms of sentiment identification, happy, sad, angry, being able to recognize faces, I had really hoped there would be some connective glue, some connective tissue to bring the power of that to the editor. And I haven't seen a lot of tools that are doing that, and not any tools that are affordable. And so that's kind of a bummer.
Well, one you might want to check into is Axle Media Asset Manager. They have a module that plugs into Axle, which connects AI image recognition with their media asset management system and can start to do what you're talking about. And that's priced at the lower end of the media asset management spectrum. And I also think that the whole idea of using AI to take a look at images is a lot harder to do than it is to say.
You know what? I'm not sure that's the case. I hate to disagree with you, Larry. I mean, Axle, first and foremost, Axle's great, but it still relies on there being a hefty amount of middleware. You're still using an asset management system to connect that. If you've worked with Premiere, you know that Premiere has a panel, which is HTML5. So being able to connect that to, let's say, Microsoft or AWS or any of those cognitive services, the glue is right there. I can only assume that there doesn't seem to be an ROI model for bringing that to the end user as opposed to saying we're going to develop it for a facility.
Well, that leads us into the next topic for discussion, which is what should we expect in the next 6 months? Do you think we're going to see more machine learning take center stage in the second half of the year?
I would like to think so. I think, unfortunately, the broadband speeds that we have here in the U.S. isn't, although it's increased over last year, it still isn't as fast as it could be, and I think that's still a hindrance. That being said, the whole the cloud methodology is different budgets, and I don't want to go on a complete tangent, but we've always operated on a CapEx kind of methodology, which is you buy new gear, you use new gear. When it's old, after 3 or 5 years, you buy new gear. And when we start looking into cloud methodologies and using cloud AI and then maybe Avid and then maybe Adobe, we start looking into OpEx, right? We're looking for the monthly payments. And I think that is causing the post industry and production industry to kind of pivot and start saying, well, I have to plan my money differently. I have to spend my money differently. And I think that's caused a few hiccups for a lot of these reoccurring costs.
You know, just speaking from my personal experience, I think that's absolutely true, is that once a project is done, I don't want to lose access to my data, but I also don't have any money left to spend. To have to continually pay money for storage or pay money to access the data, that requires a whole different way of thinking.
And I think especially for the little microcosm here that is Hollywood, is that changes the complete paradigm because things are based on CapEx expenditures. So that really changes things. And I think the side effect of that is we now see creative tools like Avid and Adobe almost completely moving to that kind of model, which means their software updates come differently. So instead of, this big rush to hit a release by the end of the quarter or to meet the announcements that sales announced but engineering didn't agree to, we're now getting, incremental updates that allows them to kind of fix things. And I think we're going to see over the second half of the year that Adobe and Avid are going to slow down a little bit in terms of new features and shock and awe and get to fixing some of the things that maybe weren't completed or just aren't functioning well.
And the other challenge we've got is that subscriptions make a lot of sense from the developer point of view, but as you point out, may not make complete sense from the end user point of view. But before we move further than that, one thing that caught me was an email that you guys sent out yesterday, which is this upcoming Adobe Premiere workflow event that Keycode Media is doing with SNS. What are you showcasing here in terms of collaboration?
Well, that's going to be a great event online. SNS is shared storage, and it works with Avid, Adobe, Final Cut, everything out there. But they've got some automation in the background. They have Share Browser, which is their kind of my first asset management system, and attached to Share Browser is something called Slingshot, and Slingshot is automation in the background. And one of the things we'll be showing is how you can use cognitive services in the cloud to actually index and tag your data, all while sharing projects, or BIMs, within Premiere. So not only can you collaborate on projects, but you also can send it to the cloud for analysis.
Very cool. For people that want more information, where can they go on the web?
2 different places. You can go to keycodemedia.com. You can also go to michaelkammes.com.
And the Michael Kammes himself is the voice you're listening to. By the way, Michael, next week we're going to have Jonathan Amayo of Keycode Media on the show talking about training. So you guys are making a big deal of noise, and I'm glad to have you with us.
You're going to love it. Thank you, Larry.
You take care, Michael. We'll talk to you soon. You know, I've been thinking. I was intrigued by Mark Spencer's comment that while our tools have never been cheaper or higher quality, it's harder than ever to convince clients to create budgets that allow us to use those tools or our skills to their full potential. This echoes what I'm hearing from many others, that it's harder than ever to make a living in media. It's easy to bemoan the larger budgets and reduced competition of the good old days. But rather than complain, it makes more sense to look for ways to improve the situation. As Mark indicated, ongoing skills training is essential. So also is developing a specialty. Anyone coming out of college will market themselves as a jack of all trades. What we need to do is find ways to specialize, to stand out from the crowd and separate ourselves from the competition. It's also critically important to polish our people skills. The person most likely to give us work is a client who has already hired us. We need to treat them as strategic partners. What can we provide that enables them to improve their visibility, or marketing, or customer training, or whatever? The need for media has exploded far beyond traditional programming. We, as media creators, need to take advantage of this. Whether this means exploring VR to create experiences, shooting vertical video for social media, or creating compelling motion graphics for display advertising, the more we think outside the traditional box of programming, the more ways we can find to become indispensable. Our ability to work with technology is important, but what's critical is our ability to tell stories with moving images. The audience for media has never been bigger. To meet the need requires constant skills training, improved people skills, and the ability, as Wayne Gretzky once said, for us to skate to where the puck is going, and not simply where it is today. And at the heart of all that movement are stories. Just something I'm thinking about. I want to thank this week's guests, Mark Spencer with Ripple Training, Philip Hodgetts with Lumberjack System, Ned Soltz with Red Shark News, Michael Kammes with Keycode Media, and James DeRuvo with DoddleNEWS.com. There's a lot of history in our industry, and it's all posted to our website at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Here you'll find thousands of interviews, all online and all available to you today. And remember to sign up for our free weekly show newsletter that comes out every Saturday. Talk with us on Twitter at DPBuzz and Facebook at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Our theme music is composed by Nathan Doogie Turner, with additional music provided by smartsound.com. Our producer is Debbie Price. My name is Larry Jordan, and thanks for listening to the Digital Production Buzz. The Digital Production Buzz is copyright 2018 by Thalo LLC.